the Invention Secrecy Act. In 1951, deep within the halls of Congress, a piece of legislation was quietly signed into law that would forever change the landscape of human innovation. This wasn't a bill designed to protect national monuments or regulate commerce. Instead, it granted the United States government unprecedented power to seize, classify, and bury any invention deemed too dangerous for public knowledge. The Invention Secrecy Act didn't just create a mechanism for controlling technology. It created a shadow patent system where brilliant minds could have their life's work vanish into classified vaults, never to see the light of day. What makes this law truly terrifying is its scope. According to recently declassified documents obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, over 5,700 patents are currently being suppressed under government secrecy orders. These aren't just military weapons or advanced radar systems. The suppressed inventions include solar panel technology from the 1970s, ceramic innovations, semiconductor breakthroughs, and even software applications that could have transformed entire industries decades ago. The government doesn't just review these patents and reject them. They actively prevent inventors from discussing their work, sharing their discoveries, or even mentioning that their invention exists. The process works like this. When an inventor files a patent application, it gets reviewed not just by patent examiners, but by representatives from various federal agencies. If even a single agency decides that the invention poses a risk to national security or economic stability, a secrecy order can be imposed immediately. The inventor is then legally forbidden from disclosing any details about their creation. They cannot sell it, license it, or even talk about it publicly. Violation of a secrecy order can result in massive fines and imprisonment. What's more disturbing is that the criteria for determining which inventions get suppressed is itself classified. The government won't even tell us how they decide what's too dangerous for society to know. But the real question isn't whether this system exists. The documents prove it does. The real question is what kind of world we might be living in if these thousands of suppressed inventions had been allowed to flourish. What breakthroughs in energy, medicine, transportation, and communication have been locked away in government vaults? And why would a democratic society choose to suppress technologies that could benefit all of humanity? The Stanley Meyer water fuel cell. In 1998, in a quiet restaurant parking lot in Ohio, inventor Stanley Meyer collapsed and died after claiming someone had poisoned him. Minutes earlier, he had been discussing his most controversial creation with two Belgian investors. A device that could power automobiles using nothing but ordinary water. Meyer wasn't some basement tinkerer with delusions of grandeur. He held legitimate patents for his water fuel cell technology and had conducted multiple public demonstrations of a modified dune buggy that appeared to run exclusively on water. Meyer's invention worked through a process he called electrolytic dissociation. Unlike traditional electrolysis, which requires massive amounts of electricity to split water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen, Meyer claimed his system could achieve the same result using minimal electrical input. His device used carefully tuned frequency pulses and resonance circuits to break apart water molecules with far less energy than conventional physics suggested was possible. The hydrogen gas produced would then be burned as fuel, creating a clean combustion process that emitted only water vapor as exhaust. The demonstrations were remarkable. Video footage shows Meyer's water-powered vehicle driving smoothly down highways, its only emission being water vapor trailing from the exhaust pipe. He would fill the fuel tank with ordinary tap water, start the engine, and drive for miles without any gasoline or other conventional fuel source. Media outlets covered his work extensively, and he attracted attention from NATO scientists, venture capitalists, and foreign governments. Some sources claim that investors from Middle Eastern countries offered to purchase his technology outright for astronomical sums. Meyer reportedly refused all offers, insisting that his invention belonged to humanity. The circumstances surrounding Meyer's death remain controversial. According to his brother Stephen, Stanley burst out of the restaurant clutching his throat, vomited, and collapsed in the parking lot. His final words were allegedly, "They poisoned me." The official cause of death was ruled a cerebral aneurysm with no toxins detected during the autopsy. However, the timing was suspicious. Meyer had been scheduled to demonstrate his technology to a group of international investors the following week. After his death, the prototype vehicle disappeared, his patents lapsed, and his workshop was mysteriously emptied. Researchers who have attempted to replicate Meyer's design encounter persistent problems. The available schematics appear to be incomplete, as if critical components were deliberately removed or altered. Some engineers report equipment failures, shorted circuits, and unexplained burnouts when trying to recreate the resonance frequency circuits that Meyer claimed were essential to the process. Online forums discussing his work are flooded with conflicting information, dead links, and technical data that leads to dead ends. The implications of Meyer's technology, if it truly worked as claimed, would have been staggering. A car that runs on water would have made the oil industry obsolete overnight. It would have eliminated carbon emissions from transportation, destabilized entire geopolitical power structures, and fundamentally restructured the global economy. The technology would have provided clean, abundant energy to developing nations, reduced dependence on fossil fuel imports, and eliminated one of the primary sources of environmental pollution. Perhaps that's exactly why some believe Stanley Meyer's invention was never allowed to reach the public. The General Motors EV1 electric vehicle destruction. In 1996, General Motors released what many considered the future of transportation. The EV1 was the world's first mass-produced electric vehicle designed from the ground up for electric propulsion. It was sleek, silent, and decades ahead of its time. With a 100-mile range, regenerative braking, and zero emissions, the EV1 exceeded every expectation for electric vehicle performance. Drivers who leased the vehicle described it as revolutionary, comparing the experience to gliding on air rather than driving a conventional car. But within just a few years, every single EV1 was systematically hunted down, recalled, and destroyed by the very company that built it. This wasn't a safety recall due to mechanical defects or fire hazards. This was a deliberate campaign to eliminate a technology that threatened to disrupt multiple industries. Despite widespread customer satisfaction, waiting lists for new leases, and desperate offers from drivers willing to purchase their vehicles outright, General Motors refused to sell a single EV1 to consumers. The lease agreements had been carefully crafted to ensure that customers could never own their vehicles. When the leases expired, GM began repossessing every EV1, even from satisfied drivers who offered to pay full market price to keep them. Some customers resisted, forming advocacy groups and staging protests. A group of former lessees even offered nearly $2 million to purchase the remaining 78 vehicles scheduled for destruction. General Motors refused every offer and proceeded with their plan. The vehicles were transported to a fenced-off desert lot in Arizona, where most were systematically crushed and shredded. A few EV1s were donated to museums and educational institutions, but these were deliberately disabled, their drivetrains removed to render them permanently inoperable. The official explanations cited maintenance costs, battery limitations, and lack of consumer demand. But internal documents later revealed a different story entirely. Behind the scenes, General Motors had been lobbying California to roll back its zero-emission vehicle mandate. The law that had originally compelled the company to create the EV1 in the first place. The automotive industry, along with oil companies and parts suppliers, had quietly coordinated efforts to eliminate the electric vehicle program. The reasoning was simple but devastating. Electric vehicles required fewer repairs, no oil changes, and minimal replacement parts. They threatened the entire business model of an industry built on planned obsolescence and recurring maintenance revenue. The industry realized that profitable customers were those who needed constant repairs, regular maintenance schedules, and frequent part replacements. Electric vehicles eliminated most of these revenue streams. Dealerships made significant profits from service departments, oil changes, transmission repairs, and engine maintenance. An electric car, with its minimal moving parts and solid-state components, threatened to reduce service visits to tire rotations and software updates. The coordinated effort extended beyond automotive manufacturers. Oil companies recognized that widespread electric vehicle adoption would devastate petroleum demand for transportation fuel. Parts suppliers faced the prospect of entire product lines becoming obsolete. Even utility companies initially resisted electric vehicles, fearing that home charging would strain electrical grids they weren't prepared to upgrade. The destruction of the EV1 program wasn't just about one car model. It was about maintaining an entire ecosystem of industries dependent on combustion engine technology. The vehicles were crushed, not because they failed, but because they succeeded too well. They demonstrated that electric transportation was not only possible, but superior in many ways to gasoline-powered alternatives. That demonstration had to be erased before it could inspire competitors or change consumer expectations permanently. Tesla's wireless power transmission tower. On the windswept cliffs of Shoreham, New York, construction began on one of the most ambitious technological projects in human history. The massive skeletal structure rising from the ground wasn't designed for communication or navigation. It was built to transmit unlimited electrical power through the air itself, without wires, without meters, and without the possibility of corporate control. At the center of this revolutionary project stood Nikola Tesla, the brilliant inventor who believed he had discovered how to provide free electricity to every corner of the planet. Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower represented more than an engineering marvel. It embodied a vision of technological liberation that would have fundamentally transformed human civilization. The tower's copper dome, buried grounding rods, and high-voltage coils were carefully designed to tap into what Tesla called the Earth's natural electrical resonance. His theory suggested that the planet itself could serve as a conductor, allowing power to be transmitted to any receiver tuned to the correct frequency. The implications were staggering. Tesla envisioned a global network of transmission towers that would provide electricity to homes, factories, and cities without the need for power plants, transmission lines, or utility companies. No infrastructure costs, no monopolistic control, no monthly electric bills, just free, abundant energy available to anyone with a properly tuned receiver. The technology would have made centralized power generation obsolete and eliminated the ability of corporations to profit from energy scarcity. Initially, the project attracted significant financial backing from J.P. Morgan, one of the most powerful financiers of the era. Morgan invested the equivalent of $5 million in today's currency, believing that Tesla's wireless communication system could compete with existing telegraph technologies. But when Tesla revealed the true scope of his vision, everything changed. During a meeting in 1901, Tesla explained that his tower wasn't just for sending messages. It was designed to provide free electrical power to the entire world. Morgan's reaction was swift and telling. He reportedly asked Tesla a simple but devastating question. Where do we put the meter? That question exposed the fundamental problem with Tesla's invention. Free energy couldn't be monetized. It couldn't be controlled, rationed, or sold. A technology that liberated humanity from energy dependence would have eliminated one of the most profitable industries ever created. Funding was immediately withdrawn. No other investors stepped forward despite the revolutionary potential of the technology. Construction halted in 1905, and by 1917, the tower was demolished, allegedly sold for scrap metal. Official explanations cited bankruptcy and technical limitations. But private correspondence and later interviews painted a different picture. Tesla's plan threatened to render the emerging energy monopolies obsolete before they could establish dominance over electrical distribution. After Tesla's death in 1943, Many of his notebooks and research papers disappeared. Some were reportedly seized by the Office of Alien Property, though no foreign nationals were involved. Others were quietly auctioned or simply vanished from his laboratory. The most detailed diagrams and technical specifications for the wireless power transmission system were never recovered. Modern engineers attempting to recreate Tesla's design encounter inexplicable failures, equipment malfunctions, and resonance effects that can't be sustained or replicated. The century-long light bulb conspiracy. In a fire station in Livermore, California, a single light bulb has been glowing continuously since 1901. Known as the Centennial bulb, this small device has survived world wars, earthquakes, and over a century of technological change while providing steady illumination 24 hours a day. The bulb represents more than a curiosity or world record. It stands as physical evidence of a disturbing truth about planned obsolescence and corporate manipulation of consumer products. The Centennial bulb was manufactured by the Shelby Electric Company using hand-blown glass, thick carbon filament coils, and materials that modern light bulbs no longer contain. Scientific analysis reveals that the filament burns slowly and steadily, unlike contemporary tungsten designs that burn brighter but fail much faster. The bulb wasn't unique when it was made. Other bulbs from the same era routinely lasted decades, with some remaining lit for over 60 years in factories and mines across America. But something fundamental changed in the 1920s. In 1924, a secretive international alliance formed between the world's largest light bulb manufacturers, including General Electric, Philips, Osram, and other major producers. This cartel, known as the Phoebus Group, had a specific and shocking objective. They didn't want to improve light bulb technology. They wanted to deliberately limit how long light bulbs could last. Documents uncovered decades later revealed that the cartel agreed to artificially restrict bulb lifespan to exactly 1,000 hours. Engineers who submitted designs for longer-lasting bulbs were reprimanded or reassigned. Manufacturing specifications were deliberately altered to ensure faster burnout rates. The goal was to force consumers to replace bulbs more frequently, creating a steady stream of repeat purchases that would generate enormous profits. This represents one of the earliest and most successful examples of planned obsolescence, the practice of intentionally designing products to fail within a predetermined time frame. The Phoebus cartel effectively stole decades of illumination from every household and business on Earth, forcing billions of people to buy replacement bulbs they shouldn't have needed, while generating massive profits from artificial scarcity. Attempts to revive the old manufacturing techniques have met with mysterious resistance. Original Shelby Electric Company records are incomplete or missing. Laboratories that have reverse-engineered the Centennial bulb's composition discover formulas that are supposedly incompatible with modern mass production methods. But the incompatibility isn't due to rare materials or complex manufacturing processes. The real obstacle is that longer-lasting bulbs don't align with business models built on constant replacement and repeat sales. Cold fusion energy suppression. In March 1989, two electrochemists at the University of Utah made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the scientific world. Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Ponce claimed they had achieved nuclear fusion at room temperature using a simple tabletop apparatus containing heavy water and palladium electrodes. Their experiment allegedly produced excess heat that could only be explained by nuclear processes, along with small amounts of nuclear reaction byproducts, including neutrons and tritium. The implications were revolutionary. Cold fusion would have provided unlimited clean energy from seawater without radioactive waste, greenhouse gas emissions, or the massive infrastructure required for traditional nuclear power plants. The technology promised to solve the world's energy crisis using equipment simple enough to operate in ordinary laboratories. Initial media coverage described the discovery as potentially more important than the invention of fire. But within months, the scientific establishment launched a coordinated campaign to discredit and suppress cold fusion research. Laboratories worldwide attempted to replicate the excess heat effect, with most reporting failure to reproduce the results. Several early positive reports were later retracted, and errors in the original experiment were allegedly identified. By late 1989, the scientific consensus declared that cold fusion claims were unsupported, with one American Physical Society panel infamously labeling it pathological science. The rapid fall from grace led some researchers to suspect active suppression rather than legitimate scientific criticism. Dr. Eugene Malov, the chief science writer at MIT during the cold fusion episode, resigned in protest after accusing his colleagues of manipulating data to discredit Ponce and Fleischmann. Malov claimed that MIT's own replication data showed a small excess heat signal that was deliberately smoothed out to show no effect. He wrote extensively about what he called an organized campaign of ridicule by mainstream physicists, particularly those involved in hot fusion research who feared competition for funding and prestige. Teague. The internal controversy at MIT exposed deeper problems within the scientific community. Analysis of MIT's own replication data allegedly showed positive results that were systematically altered to appear negative. When Malov demanded access to the raw experimental data, he was denied. Internal memos surfaced, suggesting that certain physicists had predetermined conclusions before conducting their experiments. The rush to debunk cold fusion appeared less like careful scientific methodology and more like damage control. Meanwhile, researchers who continued investigating cold fusion reported systematic harassment and funding cuts. Laboratories that showed positive results found their grants mysteriously cancelled. Academic careers were destroyed for scientists who refused to abandon the research. Scientific journals implemented policies that effectively banned cold fusion papers from publication. The message was clear: pursue this line of research at your own peril. What makes the suppression particularly suspicious is that it targeted the research itself, not just flawed experimental methods. Even improved experimental designs and more sophisticated measurement techniques were dismissed without serious consideration. The scientific establishment seemed determined to eliminate cold fusion as a field of study rather than refine the experimental approach to determine what was actually happening. In 2015, Google launched a $10 million research program to investigate cold fusion claims. After years of careful experimentation using advanced materials and measurement techniques, Google researchers admitted they found no evidence supporting cold fusion. However, their negative results don't explain why the original research was suppressed so aggressively, rather than simply investigated more thoroughly. The pattern suggests that certain discoveries pose threats beyond scientific accuracy. The infinite battery patents. In 1973, retired aerospace engineer Carl Kordesh unveiled a battery prototype that threatened to revolutionize energy storage forever. Working from decades of experience developing alkaline batteries and fuel cells for NASA, Kordesh had created a hybrid power source capable of continuous operation for up to 50 years without replacement or recharge. The battery combined alkaline manganese dioxide chemistry with a closed-loop hydrogen regeneration system, allowing it to restore its own charge during operation. Unlike lithium-ion batteries that degrade over time and require dangerous mining operations for rare earth materials, Kordesh's design used common elements and contained minimal moving parts. The battery generated continuous current even when idle and could function in extreme temperatures that would disable conventional power sources. Laboratory tests confirmed that the device maintained stable output for months without any measurable capacity loss. When Kordesh presented his invention to energy regulators and corporate partners, the response was surprisingly tepid. One representative from a major electronics manufacturer reportedly stated that a battery lasting longer than their products wasn't sustainable for their business model. No licensing agreements were signed, despite the obvious commercial potential. Further testing contracts were mysteriously cancelled, and funding for additional research dried up entirely. Documents from Kordesh's personal archive revealed that he had pitched the technology to multiple governments and corporations throughout the 1970s and 80s. Most meetings followed the same pattern: initial enthusiasm followed by prolonged silence. Representatives consistently encouraged him to focus on more commercially viable solutions, meaning products that would require regular replacement. Patent applications for the full regeneration system stalled under claims of insufficient industrial applicability. In 1982, a private investor attempted to commercialize the battery technology under a new company promising power for life. The startup attracted significant media attention and preliminary orders from electronics manufacturers. However, within 6 months, the company collapsed under mysterious circumstances. No production units were ever manufactured at scale, and the remaining prototypes were confiscated during a regulatory inspection for compliance review. They were never returned to the inventor or the defunct company. The vacuum energy motor. In 1983, independent engineer Troy Hurtubise claimed to have built a revolutionary engine in his suburban Toronto workshop. The device, no larger than a shoebox, allegedly operated by manipulating vacuum pressure to create continuous rotational motion without any external fuel, electricity, or combustion. Hurtubise called his creation the Angel Light Engine, convinced that it tapped into natural forces that mainstream physics had overlooked or deliberately ignored. The engine consisted of copper coils, titanium plates, and powerful magnets arranged in a configuration that Hurtubise claimed could generate a vacuum inversion chamber. Opposing magnetic fields created constant pressure differentials that mimicked the vacuum energy believed to exist in deep space. The device supposedly borrowed energy from the quantum vacuum itself, producing more mechanical output than the minimal electrical input required for the magnetic field generators. Witnesses reported that the prototype not only powered itself, but generated enough torque to drive mechanical systems attached to its output shaft. The engine emitted a soft humming sound and rotated a connected flywheel without any visible energy source. Journalists and engineers who observed demonstrations described the device as genuinely perplexing, operating in ways that seemed to violate conventional understanding of energy conservation. Shortly after conducting public demonstrations, Hurtubise received visits from what he described as men in suits who questioned him about his background, material sources, and intentions for the invention. The visitors wanted to know whether he planned to patent or sell the technology. A week later, his workshop burned to the ground in what was ruled an electrical fire. Despite the building having no grid connection and no active power supply at the time of the incident, no physical evidence of the vacuum energy engine survived the fire. Hurtubise attempted to rebuild the device but reported increasing surveillance, interference with component shipments, and repeated vandalism of his replacement workshop. He eventually retreated from public view, later surfacing with different inventions including electromagnetic devices and bulletproof armor, but never again discussed the vacuum energy motor that had attracted such dangerous attention: the magnetic perpetual motion motor. In the late 1970s, physicist Howard Johnson submitted a patent application that would challenge everything mainstream science believed about energy conservation. Johnson claimed to have developed a magnetic motor capable of continuous rotation without fuel, electricity, or any external power source. The engine operated solely through precisely arranged permanent magnets that created cascading repulsion forces, sustaining motion indefinitely once initially started. The design appeared deceptively simple. Curved permanent magnets were arranged along a stator housing, interacting with equally precise magnets mounted on a rotor assembly. As the magnets passed each other, they generated a sequence of push forces that maintained rotational momentum without requiring energy input. Johnson maintained that his motor didn't create energy from nothing, but merely released potential energy already stored within magnetic field structures. In 1980, to the astonishment of patent examiners and physicists alike, the United States Patent Office granted patent number 4,151,431 for Johnson's permanent magnet motor. This official recognition represented unprecedented acknowledgement that a seemingly impossible device might actually function as claimed. The patent approval sent shockwaves through scientific communities that had dismissed magnetic perpetual motion as theoretical impossibility. Johnson conducted private demonstrations for journalists, physicists, and potential investors. Video recordings show his prototype motor spinning continuously without any apparent energy source, maintaining constant rotational speed for extended periods. Some observers reported electromagnetic field measurements that seemed to confirm unusual magnetic interactions within the device. However, attempts to replicate the motor using Johnson's patent specifications consistently failed. The scientific establishment responded with swift opposition. Major journals refused to publish papers about the magnetic motor. Laboratories attempting replication reported mysterious equipment failures, spontaneous demagnetization of components, and unstable rotation that couldn't be sustained. Some researchers speculated that the motor required materials or magnetic alignments so precise that reproduction was impossible without access to Johnson's original manufacturing techniques. As interest in the magnetic motor grew, Johnson faced increasing pressure from multiple sources. Legal challenges emerged regarding the scope and validity of his patent. Companies that initially expressed licensing interest abruptly withdrew without explanation. One collaborator reported receiving offers to purchase and permanently bury the patent rights in exchange for substantial financial compensation. Johnson refused all buyout attempts. By the late 1980s, Johnson was effectively isolated from funding sources and research partners. His health declined, and he gave fewer public interviews about his invention. In one of his final recorded statements, he observed that opponents didn't need to disprove his motor scientifically. They only needed to outlast him personally and prevent commercial development until the patent expired and he was no longer able to defend his work. Johnson died in 2008 without ever seeing his magnetic motor developed commercially. The patent entered public domain, making the design freely available to anyone willing to attempt replication. However, the motor remains taboo in mainstream scientific circles, dismissed as pseudoscience, despite the existence of official patent documentation. If Johnson's design truly functioned as claimed, it represented one of the most significant energy breakthroughs in human history, capable of providing mechanical power without fuel, emissions, or operational costs. The trash-to-fuel converter. In 2003, within a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of São Paulo, Brazil, a team of engineers unveiled a prototype that promised to solve two of humanity's most pressing crises simultaneously. Their invention could transform ordinary household garbage into clean, burning gasoline using a process they called thermal depolymerization. The machine, roughly the size of a shipping container, operated silently and produced no toxic emissions while converting plastic bottles, food waste, and mixed urban refuse into fuel indistinguishable from petroleum products. The Brazilian team had developed proprietary catalysts and high-pressure chambers that broke down materials at the molecular level, reassembling carbon chains into usable fuel with over 80% conversion efficiency. Unlike incineration or basic pyrolysis, their system could process both organic and synthetic waste without generating harmful byproducts. Demonstration videos showed diesel generators running for days on fuel derived entirely from municipal garbage, producing power cleaner than conventional refined gasoline. Early tests attracted attention from environmental groups, international media, and government officials. The technology offered a revolutionary solution to overflowing landfills, while simultaneously addressing energy scarcity in developing nations. One test powered electrical systems for 48 hours using nothing but fuel created from mixed urban waste, Another demonstration produced fuel that exceeded Brazil's regulatory standards for commercial gasoline, suggesting the process could generate premium-grade energy from materials typically considered worthless. Project Gaia, as the engineers called their system, represented more than technological innovation. It threatened to fundamentally alter waste management economics and energy production infrastructure. Countries drowning in plastic pollution could suddenly transform their environmental liability into valuable fuel resources. The technology would have eliminated disposal costs while generating revenue from materials that previously required expensive processing or burial in increasingly scarce landfill space. But within 2 months of viral news coverage reaching national television networks, the facility was raided by regulatory officials. Authorities cited violations of environmental processing licenses and confiscated machinery for inspection purposes. No arrests were made, no charges were filed, and no detailed explanation was provided for the sudden enforcement action. Permits were suspended indefinitely, and the prototype disappeared into bureaucratic custody. The engineering team vanished from public view immediately after the raid. One member was reported to have relocated to Uruguay under circumstances that remain unclear. Another later surfaced working in unrelated software development, declining all requests for interviews about the garbage fuel project. Attempts to locate the confiscated prototype through Freedom of Information requests were met with heavily redacted documents and regulatory dead ends that provided no useful information. Internal government memos uncovered years later by independent journalists revealed coordination between agencies and private energy firms weeks before the raid occurred. One communication warned of disruptive fuel synthesis devices posing threats to existing infrastructure investments. Another document outlined containment strategies for technologies that bypass traditional petroleum refining models, suggesting the suppression was coordinated rather than coincidental. The Illness Prediction Scanner. In 2009, a modest medical research laboratory in Geneva developed a diagnostic device that could detect diseases months before symptoms appeared. The prototype, roughly the size of a briefcase, scanned electromagnetic fields emitted by human bodies and identified cellular anomalies using biofrequency mapping techniques. Unlike conventional diagnostics that required blood samples, imaging, or invasive procedures, this device could detect cancer, neurological disorders, and chronic conditions through simple electromagnetic analysis. Clinical trials produced startling results. The neuroscope, as researchers called their invention, consistently identified malignant growths weeks before they became visible through traditional imaging systems. For neurological conditions, the device detected early-stage Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease based on subtle shifts in neural electromagnetic signatures. Controlled testing showed the scanner could flag chronic illnesses in subjects who had not yet been formally diagnosed through conventional medical examination. The underlying technology wasn't entirely revolutionary in principle. Researchers had long speculated that human bodies emit unique electromagnetic signatures influenced by internal health conditions. However, the neuroscope was the first system to quantify and interpret those frequencies using machine learning algorithms, biofeedback analysis, and ultra-sensitive sensors capable of detecting minute deviations in biological harmonic patterns. Swiss and German hospitals quietly began requesting pilot units for experimental diagnostic programs. World Health Organization representatives observed demonstrations and expressed preliminary interest in broader testing protocols. However, when a pharmaceutical executive was shown the device's capabilities, he reportedly asked why anyone would need routine medical screenings if diseases could be detected before symptoms developed. These 8 suppressed inventions reveal a disturbing pattern that spans decades of human innovation. From government secrecy laws to corporate sabotage, from mysterious fires to convenient deaths, the same forces consistently emerge to silence technologies that threaten established power structures. The question isn't whether these inventions could have changed the world. The evidence suggests they already had. The real question is who decided that humanity wasn't ready for that future, and why we continue to accept a world built on artificial scarcity instead of abundant possibility.